Hello, I'm Jacob, here to walk you through step by step the assembly process of your brand new Apollo mountain bike. Now I have the Orchid full suspension mountain bike here today. It's a 26-inch wheel, but any of the other mountain bikes will have the same assembly steps, so you can follow along with them as well. And first, good idea, always locate your parts box. And I don't think we have anything else loose lying in here. Just a brand new bike. So, once you get your bike out of the box, begin clipping any zip ties and start to remove all of your packaging material. And so we'll start by removing this front wheel. Get that set aside. And this is a great place to have that box right on standby for garbage. There is a plastic cap here on the end of the quill stem. That will need to come off of there. And before you insert that stem down into your frame, make sure all cables are straight and not tangled. As you can see, that front brake cable was twisted around, so I had to straighten that fork all the way around. And once all those cables are free and clear, untangled, do take a little bit of grease, insert it down into the steering column of the bike, as well as onto just a little bit of your wedge and quill stem. This will insert. And you may need to take a 6mm Allen wrench, unloosen that just a little bit to create more space down in there. Do not loosen it all the way to take this wedge off, but just for a little bit more play, and that will slide down in there much easier. Also, be aware of the minimum insertion tick marks located on the stem. Insert the stem all the way in until those little tick marks disappear. Then tighten your quill stem back up just a little bit. All right, now let's see what we have in our box of spare parts. Pedals, a seat or saddle, as well as that seat post, owner's manual, excellent, with full list of instructions. Looks like we've got some reflectors and some brackets there. And a couple small tools to help with the assembly process. continue to remove all the rest of the packaging. Then we will turn our attention back to the front wheel. Remove the axle guards installed for shipping and loosen the axle nuts. And you will also notice two small safety tabs on each side of the axle with tabs that are facing inward. Also note the direction and tread pattern of your tire. As you can see, this tire is directional with the tread pattern pointing forward, but you can also look on the tire and find a rotation and arrow marked towards the front. To install the wheel, first undo your front brake, grasp the brake noodle and pull to separate the cable from the fixture on the right brake arm. There is a fork guard on the bike that needs to be slid out before we can insert our wheel. Now this part can be tricky, so if you have someone to help hold the bike or steady the wheel as you guide it in, also be sure that the safety tabs on the axle go into the fork before tightening the axle nuts down on both sides. The reason for the safety tabs allows the wheel to stay in the frame and fork in case the axle nuts are loose. The wheel will still stay in the frame. Using the supplied multi-tool, you can tighten the axle nuts down. First one side, then the other. It does help with assembly after that front wheel goes in to put that kickstand down and help prop the bike up. Next, we will install our seat on the bike. Again, just like with the stem on the front of the bike, you will want to be sure to add a little bit of grease down into the seat tube. This will prevent the seat post from rusting in place and allow you to move it up and down throughout the time you have the bike. Again, note the minimum insertion tick marks on the seat post, ensuring that when inserted, those tick marks fully disappear. Use the quick release mechanism to lock the seat post in place. The quick release acts as a cam mechanism, so by tightening the nut on one side and then pushing the quick release lever closed, you are essentially tightening that into the frame. Our seat does mount on top of the seat post, simply sliding on. Now, before adjusting the tightness and angle direction of the seat, you do want to ensure that it is pointed straight forward and horizontal to the ground. Be sure to tighten the saddle clamp on both sides to ensure a tight and proper fit. And I'll tighten the seat post clamp a little bit more. Keep that held in place and pointed forward with the bike. There we go. Moving back to the front stem of the bike, again referring to our tick marks, we will take the supplied 6mm Allen key and tighten this stem fully. Next, we will turn our attention back to the front brake. In order to re-engage the front brake, we will want to pull our brake noodle attached to the left brake arm all the way while simultaneously pushing the right brake arm in and being able to slip the cable of the brake just through the small slit on the anchor point before catching on the neck of the brake noodle. Now it is important to adjust your pad positioning on the brake. As you can see, this brake pad is much lower and only contacting just the bottom portion of the rim. Using a 5mm wrench, one of which is supplied, you will just loosen the nut on the back of this brake pad, allowing it to pivot and spin. We will then reposition this brake pad so it is fully contacting the rim, and then retighten the brake pad down. Double check and ensure that the brake pad is fully contacting the rim. Repeat the same process on the opposite side, and as you can see, we are touching the tire on this side. So I will once again loosen that brake pad just a touch. We will bring this pad back to the correct position before retightening. The final step of any brake adjustment is always to be sure that the brake pads are center. When squeezing this brake, you'll notice that the right brake arm has space between the pad and the rim, while the right is contacting the rim. We will first tighten the spring tension screw in on the side of the brake arm that needs more tension to be pulled away from the rim. Noticing that it moved just a little bit, we will recheck and make further adjustments, including loosening the spring tension on the opposite brake arm, if needed. Now you can see both brake arms are moving equal distance. With the brake pads making proper contact on the rim. After adjusting the front brakes, return to the rear brake and repeat the exact same process. In this case, both brake pads are hitting the rim correctly, but one side is moving much more than the other. So I will increase the spring tension on this right brake arm until I get equal movement on both brake arms. Lastly, you can tuck your cables into the brake arm to give your bike a little bit cleaner look. Once both brakes have been properly adjusted, we will move on to installing the pedals. Before installing the pedals, do note that the right side pedal is normal right threaded and the left side is opposite threading. So we will turn the right side normal righty-tighty and the left side will be lefty-tighty. Again, grab some grease, apply that to the threading on both pedals to keep them from seizing or rusting onto the bike. We do have the pedals marked, one left and one right. So the pedal marked right goes onto the right crank arm on the drive side of the bike. Begin threading the pedal in by hand and continue doing so until it runs out of threads. It's very important to begin threading pedals by hand, as you do not want to cross thread them. Finally, using the supplied multi-tool, fully tighten the pedal into the crank arm. The left pedal is threaded opposite and is marked with the L sticker. However, if that does disappear, you'll notice this pedal does have these grooves on the shaft of the spindle, whereas the right pedal does not. Threading in by hand to the left. Again, making sure to thread it fully with your fingers as to not cross thread it when installing. Once pedals have been installed, we will move on to the derailleur system and shifting mechanisms of the bike. First, it will be most important to check the limit screws on our rear derailleur. To do this, we will shift the bike up into the lowest gear or largest, most inner cog on the rear freewheel on the back of the bike. Notice how the derailleur cage and pulleys are inside of that largest cog and chain. Take your Phillips screwdriver, find the screw on the outside of the derailleur, marked L, and begin to screw that limit screw in to move your derailleur in until the pulley, derailleur cage, and chain are all in line. When the bike is in the easiest gear on the back, you will then check the limit screw on the front derailleur for the low position. Note how the chain is contacting the inside plate of the front derailleur. We will want to locate the front derailleur low limit screw and begin unscrewing that in order to create space between that front derailleur and chain, leaving about a 1 to 3 millimeter gap. Returning to the rear derailleur, shift your bike all the way into the smallest cog and note the angle of the chain. And on this bike right now, it is pitched outward, leaving potential for the chain to get caught between the frame and the gears. So we will align those using the H limit screw for your highest gears on the rear derailleur, and we will begin to tighten that, moving our derailleur inboard until that cog and chain are all in line perfectly together. With the chain in the smallest cog on the rear, we will then turn our attention back to the front derailleur to adjust the high limit screw in this position. Note again the small space between the chain and that inside plate of the derailleur. You will want to have, again, between 1 and 3 millimeters of space between there. So in this case, my chain is touching that derailleur, so I will unscrew that H limit screw on the front derailleur, and that should give me a little bit more space there, so we no longer have the chain rubbing on the derailleur. With the tricky bits of your assembly finished, we will move on to the final few steps. Of course, we will want to install our reflectors. The front and rear slide on to the bracket, and with the screw pre-installed, we will install our white or clear reflector on the front handlebar. Ensuring that it is pointed forward. And of course, the red reflector goes on the rear, mounted around the seat post, pointed back. Finally, the last step of your assembly is to put air into the tires. Both tires have a PSI rank of 50 PSI, and then you are ready to ride. Have fun!